going to go through our very, very basic HCP programs and policies and discuss responsibilities and guidelines of you guys as volunteers on the dog beach. Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you, if you're from this area, are familiar with our wide variety of species that we have here on our beaches. First and foremost, I know a lot of people think of sea turtles. We talk about sea turtles a lot, and they're definitely an important species that we have here on our beach. But we have a lot of other kind of unique species that use our beach habitat as well, both threatened and endangered species. So we do have a variety of different sea turtles, which we'll talk about in a little bit, but we also have a wide variety of shorebirds, both nesting shorebirds and other types of birds that do use our beaches for resting in the winter. And then we also have a really unique little critter called the southeastern beach mouse, and that little guy is found primarily inside Smyrna Dunes Park. So we don't see them outside of there too often, but they do utilize the dune habitat in Smyrna Dunes Park. So if you're from our area, I'm sure you're aware that beach driving has actually been a part of our history since the early day of the automobile. So people have actually been driving on Volusia County beaches for a very, very long time, and we do keep that tradition alive. But as you can see in the top pictures, kind of way back in the day, it was a little bit of unmanaged chaos. Wherever you could fit a car, you did fit a car. Well, that works in some instances, but not when we're trying to protect the habitat and the species that that depend on the beach. So we did develop that habitat conservation plan, which kind of really streamlines how our vehicles are using the beach and protecting the species and the habitat. So now we have 1 row of parked cars and 2 rows of traffic of beach driving. This all kind of came into play with the passing of the Endangered Species Act back in 1973. And what this act did was it intended to protect species from extinction through various programs, and those conserved populations and the habitats that they depend on. So really what the Endangered Species Act does is it prohibits take. Take can be a couple of things. It could be the killing of an animal or a non-lethal impact to that animal that kind of limits its ability to perform essential behaviors. And that could be something like feeding or breeding or even taking shelter. So after the passing of the Endangered Species Act, and because we had beach driving, Volusia County had to apply for what's called an incidental take permit, or an ITP. What that ITP does is it authorizes any unintentional or incidental take that occurs during the course of an otherwise lawful activity, which in our case is beach driving. The primary component of that ITP application is the development of a habitat conservation plan. It is a required component of the ITP, and really what it does is it describes all the programs and policies that we have set in place to minimize any incidental take and mitigate for any unavoidable take that might occur. Volusia County was issued its first ITP back in 1996. It was renewed in 2005 for 25 years, so we don't have to reapply again until 2030. Okay, so there are a variety of different direct and indirect impacts to protected species that could result from beach driving. First and foremost, kind of probably the most obvious, is going to be a direct collision with one of our animals. Kind of first and foremost, again, is sea turtles. So we could have a direct collision with one of our nesting females coming ashore to lay her eggs, maybe emerging hatchlings that are coming out of their nest and trying to make it down to the ocean. We do get sick and injured stranded sea turtles that wash back up onto our beach, so they could be impacted as well. And then piping plovers, we'll talk about them in a little bit too, but they're a small bird that likes to rest in the ruts, tire ruts. Another kind of direct impact to protected species could be directly to our sea turtle nests. Sea turtles, I'm sure you know that they actually lay their eggs underneath the sand about 1.5 feet down. Vehicles, even on the small side, can be a couple of thousands of pounds. So if a vehicle was to traverse directly over top of one of our incubating sea turtle nests, it has the potential to crush those eggs that are incubating under the sand. Remember, take doesn't have to be a direct killing of an animal, but it could be harassment in a non-lethal sense. So we do consider hatchling rut encounters take. So any vehicle that's traversing on our beach has the potential to leave, tire tracks or ruts in the sand behind it. Typically, those ruts are traveling north and south. All of our emerging hatchlings are trying to go east into the water. So any rut encounter that those turtles may impact could be considered take. And then other kind of indirect impacts to the physical changes of our beach, things that drip and drop out of our vehicles could change the habitat as well.
Excuse me, Jamie, just real quick. I think
Yep.
somebody's not on mute. If everybody could just check and make sure that your mics are off, we'd appreciate it.
Okay. If you're from this area, you're probably familiar with the Marine Science Center. If you haven't been there, I highly recommend going down. It's down in Ponce Inlet near the lighthouse. The Marine Science Center is actually our primary form of mitigation under the HCP. First and foremost, they are a rehab center for both sea turtles and shorebirds. So any injured wildlife does go there for rehab, but they're also a great educational and outreach facility as well. Okay, so Terry touched on this a little bit, but Volusia County is huge. Volusia County actually has 50 miles of beach, but the county exercises authority over the 35.6 miles in the middle. So we have no authority over North Peninsula State Park in the north or Canaveral National Seashore in the south, but we do have authority over both inlet beaches, Smyrna Dunes Park and Lighthouse Point Park. Okay. So kind of a brief overview of our habitat conservation plan philosophy. We have 4 strategies that we implement to allow beach driving on our beaches. And as we go through these steps, really what I just want you guys to think about is really what we're doing is we're separating our protected species from vehicles on our beaches. So we do that in 4 ways. They're listed here in front of you. Our vehicle access times, our beach management areas, our conservation zone, and our marked nest sites. So first is vehicle access times. This is our public access hours. So during the sea turtle nesting season, which is May 1st through October 31st, public driving on our beaches is 8 a.m. or after the sea turtle nesting survey has been completed until 7 p.m. or sunset. You guys helping out in this area would fall under this category as public access hours. So these are important for you guys to know. There are some other user groups have, kind of varying hours throughout the season, but public hours are 8 a.m. until 7 p.m. during nesting season. Outside of nesting season, it's going to be November 1st through April 30th, and that is sunrise to sunset. Okay, our second strategy is our different beach management areas. So that graph on the right, it can be really, really busy and maybe hard to kind of see what's going on there. But really what it's showing you is our coastline before the HCP went into place, which is on the left, and after the HCP, which is on the right. So before we had our habitat conservation plan, we had 2 areas. We had a driving zone and a no driving zone. All of that area in pink you see in the middle, that was our driving areas. So after we had to apply for the incidental take permit and develop the HCP, the writers of that HCP wanted to take into account where our sea turtles are actually utilizing the beach. So that's the black bar you see on the right. The thicker the black bar, the more sea turtle nests we have in that given area. So really what we did was we took those numbers into account and we expanded some of our non-driving zones in the south end in New Smyrna Beach. And in the north, we extended a little bit down to Granada Boulevard. And then we added a no driving zone in Ponce Inlet and Wilbur by the Sea north of Beach Street. The rest of the areas in yellow and red remained our driving areas. They are 2 kind of different zones. They are open to public driving. They just have a different conservation zone width. We'll talk about the conservation zone here in a second. After the HCP went into place, we reduced public driving by 35%. And just to kind of orient you, the new dog beach located up in Ormond is going to be up there in that yellow zone. That is one of our transitional driving zones. It does have a 30-foot conservation zone. Okay, speaking of the conservation zone, really what this conservation zone is doing is it's helping protect our natural sea dunes or sand dunes from vehicles and people as well. So we're probably all very familiar with how important our dune system is. It's our primary form kind of mitigation from strong winds, high tides, storm events, things like that. So our conservation zone is set up in all of our public driving areas to keep vehicles outside of that, so they're not driving over top of our vegetation and letting our dune system kind of grow naturally. So that conservation zone, I mentioned it just a little bit, has different widths depending on the driving area that you're in. For the most part, all of our public driving areas are going to have a 30-foot conservation zone. That's going to extend from the toe of the vegetation or seawall, depending on where we're at, 30 feet east towards the ocean. In our urban area, kind of our core Daytona, where we have the most people, the most vehicles, and the fewest number of sea turtles nesting, it's only a 15-foot conservation zone. There is absolutely no parking or driving inside the conservation zone in any of our public driving areas. Please, it is really important. We do have a conservation zone in the area that's set up. Please deter any digging or walking in those vegetated areas inside the CZ. And our last strategy to help protect our nesting sea turtles from vehicles is we actually mark every single nest that's laid here in Volusia County. Some other beaches in Florida, they do not mark all of the nests. There would just be stakes all over the place, especially down farther south. But we do mark all of our nests here in Volusia County. Typically, it's going to have 4 stakes in the ground with a colored ribbon connecting those 4 stakes. If that nest is laid in one of our driving areas and it is outside the conservation zone, it's going to receive 2 extra stakes with cones and more flagging tape. It just makes it even more visible to the people that are driving and parking on our beach that there is a sea turtle nest. So we really do like this photo. We like you guys to see what a nest looks like on the day it's laid. All of the nests have a unique number associated with it. You see on the front left stake. And then all sea turtle nests also have a yellow FWC sign on the front right. This is giving anybody who goes up to it the information not to go inside that nest barrier, stay outside of it, don't let anybody inside, no animals, no digging, nothing like that. It is a federal offense to go inside one of those marked nests. And I'm passing it off to Jennifer now.
All right, great job. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the protected species